I realize that we're in the age of lies, liars, deception, and we're not being told anything. When I first became aware of the chemtrail program, I called all kinds of people. I called the congressman, I called the weather stations, I called almost everybody. Nobody knew anything. Nobody could tell me anything, and I thought, well, that's really strange. I mean, I worked for a government agency. I was working for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, before. I spent 38 years with them. And anyway, I was also a weather observer in the Air Force. One week of watching the skies, when I really became aware, I knew right away it was a spray program. And there's a number of reasons I know that. First, I want to talk about one of the biggest lies, and that's contrails. When I took weather in the Air Force, the historical definition is what I saw and was taught, and that is that contrails were formed by hot jet exhaust melting ice crystals, and that they refroze very fast. These weren't. These were staying in the sky, so this was a whole new phenomenon for me. And then you realize that clouds from jets, they're not natural. Our new jets, you shouldn't be having any exhaust at all coming out of them, so they shouldn't exist from the beginning. And then you look at the little trail up at the top on the right. That trail is fairly heavy, and it's about 6 times the historic appearing contrail. It's really long. The old ones were only 2 or 3 planes long in length. And they disappeared really fast. So if contrails are persistent, they have additives. If there's any trail at all, they're sprayed. So jets turn into clouds or haze. And the other thing is, to stay in the sky like that, they have to be nano-sized, not to fall out of the sky so fast. And one of the things you learn in weather, or I learned in weather, now I haven't checked the latest weather books. I have looked at NASA's cloud charts and have been totally amazed at how many of their new clouds are based on HAARP and this technology. All of it. So the weather fact is that cirrus overcast creates greenhouse effect and increases global warming. And as I'm watching these overcasts day after day after day, I'm realizing that, this could be the cause of almost all of our global warming. Just the clouds, not going into what they're made of or anything else, but just the fact that they exist and they're up there. And interestingly enough, I know the climate scientists are all they're talking about spraying sulfur and imitating volcanoes and all that. But what amazes me is that they can be looking at this, and their proposals actually in the earlier days mimic this very program that's been in operation. And even NASA admitted in 2005 that persistent jet contrails form man-made clouds. They trap warmth in the atmosphere and increase global warming, contribute to the long-range changes in Earth's climate, and affect natural resources. So that persistent jet contrails, it's a new definition of contrails. And NASA has now classified them as clouds. Again, I'm totally amazed at that. So there's subterfuge in that. It's not true, and we're all being fed excuse me? It's a huge con. We're all being really seriously taken advantage of. And let's see, I said that. I have a lot of pictures of, I sit out in my yard with my wolf dogs, and I didn't wear this just by chance. This is my male. Anyway, I watch the sky a lot, so I've had thousands and thousands of hours of watching the sky. I also am out there with my binoculars and telescope, and I try to look at which aircraft are leaving trails. Looked at a lot of aircraft that were in the sky at the same time, weren't leaving any trails, and they were about the same altitude. Now they can say, oh, well, it was a different altitude, they got into warmer or different currents, yada, yada, yada. And also, the short trails that I showed you just a minute ago, basically those turn into haze. So what I found out is that both chemtrails and the haze are metallic nanoparticles that are drifting down through the atmosphere, and both of them are very easily used for weather manipulation. So I call it the elephant in the sky. You know, everyone sees them, but they're not part of the climate dialogue. Well, why is that? How could they have something so obvious that they're not even talking about it? And when you ask about it, nobody knows anything. It's like, what planet am I on? This is just too I almost said brazier. Yeah, obviously, this isn't all from the jet engines. And what I also found out is that there are vent tubes that come right back, and they're shy of the exhaust of the jet. Some of the new stuff, they're actually running through the jets. But most of the time, they have their exhaust ports right next to the jets, so that it blows through the jet engine. And they want to get that temperature of the exhaust up to 540 degrees, which makes nanoparticles out of them. The jets will do that for them. So they can take any kind of mix and run it through there, and it'll nanosize it. And if you have, and again, the Air Force does talk about owning the weather by 2025. I'll repeat what was said earlier. So cloud cover plus radio waves, or HAARP, is weather geoengineering. In fact, without HAARP, it's still geoengineering. This isn't the clearest of pictures that I have, but it was obvious, and I'm watching the aircraft, that they do turnarounds. These aren't commercial aircraft. You know, they don't do this. And what the other things is that most of the aircraft that I've seen are unmarked. They're either KC-135, C-141s, or other aircraft. They fly in military airspace and civilian airspace, because I know where I live where the military airspace is, so I can watch them. They fly in grid patterns. They do, well, I said turnarounds. You'll see 4 to 6 at a time. In fact, like today, there was a whole fleet out there spraying us today. So you also have variable cloud types and nuclei. As a matter of fact, I know Dennis Kucinich's Space Act, they basically talked about chemtrails, which is the first time I ran into that term, or atmospheric aerosol geoengineering, and HAARP. Well, HAARP is a scalar weapon against some of Tesla's technology. And the government first denied it, but now they admit, well, we're testing. Oh, are they testy? We've got quite a number of tests. Anyway, when I was going to New York in 2007, I flew from San Francisco to New York, and I saw a cloud and haze plasma envelope, which is if you have metallic particles falling through the air and you have a cap on it, you have a plasma environment. That is a plasma environment. And it extended from 35,000 feet to the ground. I didn't think it was possible. I was absolutely amazed. And then you look at these cloud lines that are laid out. There's different clouds. There's different nuclei. So there's a whole mix of things that isn't natural at all. And then I started asking, what happened to our normal weather fronts? Before, you'd get cirrus coming in above and then the other clouds following it, and you had a whole cloud system that would work into the area. And I thought, well, if they're changing the weather, if they're changing the wind, the biologist in me said, you're changing the natural conditions of the winds, the water precipitation, all of the things that all the plants and animals and us evolved with. And when you start altering that, that then starts leading to extinction. And we are right now in the middle of the 6th global extinction. I wonder, did their sprayers get clogged on this one? I don't know. Changing tanks? Again, they're beautiful, but they're deadly. These things are killing us. And all the clouds in this picture were made by jets. I've seen them come in and start spraying, and within a half an hour, the entire sky was covered. Really, they can spread out really fast. Well, I've seen a lot of pictures, and they were saying, oh, yeah, well, this is HAARP. I don't think this is HAARP. A created hole, it's round, and I think it's either an explosion or a laser hit from space. Again, I put a HAARP question mark, but I don't think it's HAARP. I'll show you one in a minute that I'm certain is HAARP. Here's another one of that. And you know, it looks like the fireworks explosions. You know, leave a little cloud of material in the sky after they explode. And if they'd been in a cloud, they would have created a round hole like that. And obviously the other one is a chemtrail through the middle of it. I'm not sure, this is again their testing. I'm not sure what they had in this. Polymers maybe? Anybody?
Ice nucleation.
Okay, ice nucleation. And ice nucleation is something that we could, if we got control of HAARP, refreeze a good part of the Arctic and where we're getting most of the methane discharge right now. So this could be a tool if it's in the right hands. Fibrous snow. I hadn't seen that before. The military admits spraying. The Department of Defense said there's millions of tons a year. And USAF uses aluminum or chaff because it has high electrical conductance and 10 times the reflectivity of sulfur. Why would they want that? Unless they're using it with something else, and which is a HAARP magnifier. So the force multipliers. And the military never admits any other biologicals or chemicals in their product. So what are they spraying? What do the tests show? Francis Mangels, well, here, let me start with this. Rosalind Peterson and I got a copy of the California drinking water records. And they were so confusing, the way they were written, that you couldn't tell anything off of them. We had to have a computer person create a program so we could read the damn things. I mean, it's honest. And anyway, when we did the California records in 1987, every drinking water supply in California were contaminated with the metal compounds. We found aluminum, barium, strontium, boron. I didn't put them here, lead, radium. There's a whole lot of other things that I didn't list here. And most of these were first-time occurrences and had to be related to aerial sources. There's no other way they could have all been inoculated in the same year. And the wrinkle in this is aluminum doesn't occur naturally in a free form. So it has to be manufactured. Oh, and they were talking about coal ash. And the gentleman that was talking about coal ash, I think he was right on. The metals that we found so far in testing match pretty close to different levels of fly ash. And interestingly enough, all of the coal-burning plants have reprocessing areas associated with them. And what they're doing is reprocessing the fly ash, adding water to it in a slurry, and they're shipping it in tank cars. So there is water going into it, along with the particles. And Mount Shasta data here. And this was aluminum. You know, normal is 0.50 micrograms per liter. That's really small. The maximum in drinking water is 50,000 micrograms per liter. The snow on Mount Shasta is 61,000 times micrograms per liter. And the federal action is supposed to be required at 1,000 micrograms per liter. Action taken? They didn't admit it, let alone test it or do anything about it. Barium is at the bottom. It's 8,000 micrograms per liter. Now, there were some other things involved in what they were running through these engines. I don't really have time to talk about those, and they're interesting. Then the other thing that really concerned me as a biologist was the forest soil pH. All the plants and animals, all the plants particularly, get used to certain pH values. And that tells the distribution of where they're going to grow. If you change the soil pH, you start killing the microbes that we're used to, the 5.5, and now went to 6.8. Well, that's a 10 times more alkaline. I mean, you know, aluminum is like taking Tums. It makes everything more basic. And he also said he's been measuring stream insects for 20 years, and he used to get like thousands in a sample. Now he gets less than 30. So the stream organisms are practically gone. And so that's severe aquatic ecosystem impact. And I took these, and I used lichens because lichens are one of the materials that you use to test for pollution. And I take all of my tests, like Francis did, to an analytical lab for analysis. I don't do them myself. I wanted them certified. And the lab's examples or the findings, all of these should be 0. And for Calistoga, it was 31,000 micrograms per liter, and strontium 4,900 micrograms per liter. I mean, these are all, you can see the list for yourself there. One of them's in Napa County, 2 are in Lake County. I just did a 4-county survey on lichens, and I found comparable data for all 4 counties, Sonoma Lake, Marin, and Napa. I haven't done any testing up here. It's a little out of my normal run-around range. What I noticed before I really did all my lichens testing, and that got me really concerned, was that what was happening to the trees and all the plants. Huge die-offs. Parts of trees dying. They die slowly. A good part of it was high. At the same time, we were getting high UV and high IR levels. The old UV level used to go up to 10 as high. They were finding on this fact, one of these pictures, or on the lower right, had 15. And they changed the scale to accommodate the new data. Oh, they're good at confusion here, okay? So if you don't know that, then you're dealing with the situation. It's that stress that's added to the plants that's causing the invasion of fungus and insects. Now, most of our bark beetles and other insects have IR antennas. They can see when a plant is stressed. They know when to attack it. They'll come right in and do it. And if opportunist as fungus is, it'll take. So through California, I'm not sure how far that spread now. They were treating it as if, well, it's some new thing and it's all in our management. Well, it is in our management, but not what they thought. And then when I went to, again, I traveled across the country, I saw this exact same scenario in Arkansas, Illinois, New York, Canada. They all looked identical. And they all had fungal death, different fungus. It wasn't Phytophthora ramorum is what sudden oak death is. But it had the same identical situations. Then Charles Little, in his book, The Dying of the Trees, said that the tree death in the Sierra Nevada mountains had doubled since 1983, and it's occurred from Alaska to Mexico. And since 1997, more than 20 million hectares or 50 million acres have been affected. And that's out of the U.S. Geological Survey. So near daily jet cloud cover, it's changing our normal weather patterns and stressing all of our ecosystems. It's altering natural growth cycles. It's disrupting, let me slow down. It's disrupting wildlife communities. They're changing soil pH, loss of aquatic organisms increasing, existing ecosystems are threatened. And again, as I said, we're now in the middle of the 6th global extinction. We've lost a huge number of species. A large part of the species lost has been from land use changes, clearing of the forests and for livestock and other uses. And they're all talking about CO2. Well, plants love CO2, so it shouldn't be a problem for the plants. But what it is a problem for is the heating is heating up the Arctic and other areas and releasing huge amounts of methane. And there are beds of hydrated methane in that area that are miles deep. Huge, huge. So this isn't going to go away. This is going to get worse. Then I went to the other half of it, which is HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Well, research my butt. It's not research. They're trying a lot of different things, but they're doing it for their same purposes. And I found it interesting in Holes in Heaven video. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It really explains HARP well. And they basically said, we can do what the sun does. So HARP is a solar generator. They can heat up the magnetosphere thousands of degrees. And after this video, they turned it over to the military, which got me thinking, what's meant by solar radiation management? So the term implies that they're managing effects of the sun. But if HAARP can mimic the sun, they can use this all for weather warfare, which they've been demonstrated to have done. But this is kind of how it works. You have a metallic cloud cover. You have metallic particles drifting on down through the atmosphere and into a plasma envelope. They can take HAARP and they could either heat up or cool the atmosphere itself, depending on what waves they hit it with, what frequencies they hit it with. They say, well, it's to get in contact with their submarines, and it's ELF waves, and communicating with the Earth and Earth tomography. One of the tomographers on this said, we could do that with 65 oh, for heaven's sake, my mind went blank. Excuse me?
I was just going to say, heating the Earth with 65.
65 watts. Yeah, watt. Thank you very much. Gee, I couldn't remember what it was. Oh, this could get worse. The HAARP array in Alaska has 1 billion watts in the last expansion. And as I was following well, they can also move the jet stream with this. And as I've been following the weather, somebody said, yeah, there's a new HAARP array down on an island off of Baja. And I went on Google Earth and I found it, and it's 5 arrays. And they're all bigger than Alaska. It was on an island off of the ocean side of Baja, about halfway down. I'm sorry that I didn't take a screenshot when I was there and looked at it. I went in the next day and it was fogged. Okay, I went, oh, you guys are too quick. Actually, they're really smart, and it's trying to outfox them is where we need to be. Now, this is a really interesting picture because this was taken off the Norway HAARP antenna. And supposedly they shot down a Russian missile with it. But Russia was in on the test because Russia also has HAARP. And they can use any frequency. But the patterns are very interesting. You can see the energy beam in that. So if you want to know what a HAARP energy beam looks like, that's it. It has an outside envelope, interesting spiral beams in the middle of it. And this was taken by a U.S. tourist. Also, what they can do is they call a Tesla dome. They can warp the atmosphere out miles. They said, well, this is for missile defense. Well, what happens when you push the atmosphere out? You have other stuff coming in. So I'm not sure of the full effects of it, but I don't think it's such a good idea. Now, this is a picture I took in Santa Rosa that I am certain are HAARP pressure waves. When you looked at them from the bottom, they were like this in concentric circles. I went, well, I can see the wave pattern. The clouds are showing me the wave pattern. And then this came out. They took down the HAARP website that you were talking about earlier to conceal the evidence that the U.S. weather modification and earthquake-inducing warfare. We've been using this against foreign states. So we've been doing warfare with it already. Oh, surprise, surprise. Well, who is they and why? Well, they are the United States of America Corporation, okay? They're also known as the military-industrial complex, or military bankers and industrialists. They basically took control of our money in 1913 when they convinced Woodrow Wilson that he needed to sign the Federal Reserve Act, and they would elect him president. They did. He said he would. They did. He did. And that's when these people took over our entire money and economic system. So they've had 104 years of our money to use against us. This has been going on a long time. And anyway, what it's basically called is they put us in a Babylonian debt slavery system where they're renting us our own money. Rather than some of the ideas, I know Lincoln wanted to do it, Kennedy wanted to do it, is to create our own money. So we weren't paying anybody anything or renting out our money to anybody. We're keeping it in the country. But now they're doing this all under the guise of national security. Well, who, ours or theirs? They don't want to get found out. So I could see how their security would be jeopardized by this. So I think that the two top secret secrets are the alien presence and their technology, the geoengineering war program, and the biggest secret is their control. Now, if you haven't read this, I'd recommend you do. Kennedy's Last Stand. Michael Sala, Dr. Sala wrote a very interesting presentation with it. And the two crashes in Roswell were real. Okay? So Truman created Majestic 12, which was to manage the alien situation, as he called it. And the CIA was created to work for MJ-12. They don't work for us. Okay? Their job was to go out and recover spacecraft, go around the world. And supposedly they've obtained over 38 different aircraft, and they've been doing reverse engineering on those for a long time, Area 51 and Area S4 in Nevada. And then Eisenhower made the mistake of giving them autonomy, and why he did that, I'm not sure. But when they did, that's when they branched off as the secret government. They didn't have to report to Eisenhower anymore. And when they didn't give him information, he threatened them with the First Army. He said, you either tell me what you're doing, I'm going to bring the First Army in, and we're going to neutralize you. Well, they gave him information. Kennedy and Eisenhower spent a lot of time together. And Kennedy was familiar with all of this. And he even went into Germany with... I can't ever remember this, Navy secretary at the time.
The one who was killed?
Forrester, yeah. Forrester wanted him on his staff, and Kennedy said, no, he wanted to run for office. But Forrester took him to Germany with him, and they actually saw a UFO that the Nazis were working on, as well as all the missile systems. And it wasn't too long after that. Well, actually, what Kennedy tried to do was to bring him under the auspices of the presidency, and they killed him for that. So I know that because E. Howard Hunt, who was the CIA Watergate burglar, he confessed on his deathbed that he was a bum in Dealey Plaza for the killing of Kennedy, which they called the Big Show. And that's when the secret government expanded into its international size. One of my heroes, and this was shown earlier, was Ted Gunderson, former head of the FBI. And, well, he was in a lot of different offices, but he was in Los Angeles last. And he basically said they were known as, in fact, this is the other place I heard chemtrail term used. The death dumps, otherwise known as chemical trails, are being dropped and sprayed throughout the United States, England, Scotland, Ireland, and Northern Europe. This is poison. This element, this is important to remember, this element within our society that is doing this must be stopped. And I am solidly for that.
He was poisoned with arsenic?
Yes, he was poisoned with arsenic on the testimony of his doctor. And nobody knew how he got the arsenic. So I'm sure they killed him too for it. And there have been huge numbers of whistleblowers that have all been executed for blowing the whistle on these people. So they take it, it's dead serious. They're dead. And then they were talking about governance. I didn't want to get into this too far, but just what I presented here are good guidelines for governance. And the people that are talking governance aren't talking any of this stuff. You know, they're not taking it from any recognizable base. I love Nikola Tesla, and I love this quote, "Science is but a perversion of itself unless it has, as its ultimate goal, the betterment of humanity." And Tesla was a real patriot and a humanist. So save the earth, stop using fossil fuels, stop chemtrails or justify. You know, it's time for the truth. We really need to hear this. So I'm really hoping they have a plan B. Because I don't like plan A as it's coming along. And they need to ban HARP as a weapon, but again, there could be beneficial uses to these things if we get control and know what they're doing. But we have to get control of that. We need to restore our Constitution, and we need to restore the natural environment. So, thank you.